Good morning. Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. Good morning, good morning. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good morning, good morning, good morning, and welcome, welcome, welcome to Daring Dialogues. I am your host, Shantae Charles. I hope everybody is doing well so far today, this morning, that you woke up in your right mind, ready to give God His glory and His honor through your life. Good morning, Lady Barbara. Good morning, Prophet Jonathan. Good morning, Pastor Ben. Good morning, Lady Evelyn. Good morning, Lady Latoya. It is a wonderful day. Good morning, We Dare Squad. It is a wonderful day. I hope that everybody slept well, got some rest. Next week, we're going to be back in our study of Kingdom Disciples, as well as the simplest way to change the world. But I did finish up the Power Book, and I wanted to share some things from the Power Book with you today, and as a part of our Monday motivation. So I don't think I'm going to be long. But as I read through, I may stop and say a couple of things. Again, yesterday I had a wonderful time in the Word. For those of you who joined us, I would encourage you to go back and listen to the Word from yesterday. I believe that was a word, a universal worldwide word for wherever you are. And as I went to sleep last night, the thought that kept churning in my mind from yesterday that I didn't talk about was yesterday we're actually starting a series on Daniel. So every Sunday in February you can check us out and we'll be ministering on Daniel. But one of the things that just kept going over and over in my mind, and some of you all know that feeling when you're trying to go to sleep and you're laying down and thoughts just keep going through your mind. One of the things that stuck out to me was the fact that Daniel had people around him. He was connected to people that were a part of his distinction. And so the thought that just kept going around in my mind was, are you a part of a circle that is for your distinction, or are you a part of a circle that is for your destruction? Because it actually made a difference. For all of them, it made a difference. And many times I know people like to say, check your circle, know who's in your circle, evaluate your circle, right? But I can say personally that I am not a person who is into circles. I am more of a person who is into spheres of influence. As a matter of fact, God gave me some revelation around that, and I actually wrote an article. You can type in my name online, and I wrote an article called Finding Your Sphere. And God really broke it down to me that a sphere is a set of circles within circles. So it's almost like you're not limited to one particular set of people, but you interact with different circles, and in those different circles, it creates a sphere of influence in your life. And so this is something, it's not a new concept, but it was something that God just opened my eyes to. Because if you look at all of the early writers, if you look at all of the early kind of geniuses in history, you look at the early artists and innovators, they didn't just have circles, they had spheres, right? The artists were hanging out with the poets, who were also hanging out with the historians, who were also hanging out with the civil rights activists, who were also hanging out with the scientists, all right? They weren't just off in their separate corners doing their own thing. They were actually very good friends with each other many times, even if their philosophical or their theological ideas differed. And because of that, because they were coming together, because the writers and the artists and the poets and the musicians and the scientists and the activists were all coming together, many times outside of their own circles, there was an exchange of ideas. All right. So that's why sometimes if you go to a museum and you look at some of the painters, right? Some of the painters were painting about things that were happening in activism, or things that were happening like with the Great Migration, okay, of black people moving from the South to the North. Well, he wouldn't have known to paint about that if he had not been interacting with black people who had moved from the South to the North, and they had conversation around that. So again, ask yourself, who are you connected to, and make sure that they are for your distinction. Because one of the things that kept going over in my head last night about Daniel is that Daniel had people around him who were not saying, oh, as I heard yesterday, oh, you're being too deep. What does that mean? Somebody tell me, what does that mean? You're being too deep. I'll tell you what's deep. The lake of fire is really deep. And it's going to have a lot of people going to it. All right? So you can say what you want to say, but a person who is interested in searching for truth or searching for knowledge, or a person who is interested in bettering themselves, or a person who wants to set themselves apart from the crowd, oftentimes gets a stigma, right, about being deep, or about you're going too far, right? But I'm so glad that we have Daniel as an example, because Daniel was like, I'm purposing in my heart. This is what my heart wants to do, to set a distinction in my life, to make a difference. And he had to come to that conclusion by himself. But you see in the text in Daniel chapter 1, for those of you who want to read it, you see in the text that by the time we get to verse 12, everybody is in on this distinction. And so that question just kept rolling around in my mind. And I said, I have to share that today, that you want to make sure the people that are around you, that they are for your distinction. All right. That they are for you setting yourself apart. They are for you being better. They are for you making whatever distinction that God has called you to make. You do not need people in 2018. Hear me well. You do not need people in 2018 telling you it doesn't take all that. Okay? If you're around people who are telling you it doesn't take all that, you really need to evaluate your sphere. All right? If you know that God has set certain things in your heart to do, and the people around you are like, that's ridiculous, I can't see that, then that means they don't need to get another set of eyes. You need to get another set of friends. All right? Because they may never see it. That's the reality. They may never see it. So I want to talk to you today from Gene Simmons' book on power about two people that he pointed out. And I think it's it'll be very encouraging for you and appropriate for where we are in our society today. The first one he talks about in the section that he calls modern power players is Michael Jordan. And that's the first one he talks about in here. There's several. And then the second one that I want to highlight, since everybody is talking about the Black Panther movie, is Stan Lee, who is the creator in the work of Marvel Comics. So both of these stories, I think, are very encouraging and very motivating. And I hope that you will pick up on some key things about both of these people's lives. All right. So let's look at Michael Jordan first. The quote here says from Michael Jordan, "I missed over 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. I fail over and over and over again in my life, and that is why I succeed." So, key component to good success in life is be willing to understand that there's some times that you're going to fail. There's some times that you're not going to win at all. There's some times that people are not going to receive you. There's times that people are not going to like who you are and what you stand for. All right? Michael Jordan's name is synonymous with basketball, winning, and shoes. He's a 5-time NBA MVP with 6 NBA championships, who has earned more than $93 million over the course of his basketball career. But all of that pales in comparison to the entrepreneurial titan and businessman extraordinaire that he has become since retiring from the NBA. In 2014, Forbes estimated that Michael Jordan takes in more than $100 million per year from Nike and other partners. Michael Jeffrey Jordan was born in 1963 in Brooklyn, New York. His parents were working class, and soon after his birth, they moved their family of 6 to Wilmington, North Carolina. Now, I have family that lives in Wilmington, North Carolina. That is actually the birthplace of my mother. And if you've ever been to Wilmington, there's not a whole lot there. All right? There's not a whole lot there. At a young age, Michael was said to have been massively competitive, not just with others, but also with himself. This competitive drive would push him to outperform all others on the basketball court. Despite this, in 1978, as a high school sophomore, he tried out for his school's varsity team and he failed. At this point, Michael was only standing at 5'10" at the time. He was not a standout on the court. He was one of 50 students who attempted to make the 15-member roster. Now, I used to play a little bit of basketball, so I know what this feels like. To try out for something and to fail, and then to hope the next year that you actually make it onto the team, okay? So once the team list was posted on the wall of the gym, Jordan searched for his name and found that it wasn't there. He then went home, locked himself in his bedroom, and cried, which is probably what most of us, if you are a person who loves basketball and has been dying to play, that's probably what a lot of us would have done as teenagers, right? We didn't make the list. We didn't make the cut. It's a natural inclination, right, to express your emotions, because emotions are real. They shouldn't be denied. They should have a place, but they should not be denied, all right? So he goes home, he locks himself in his bedroom, and he cries. Many people at this point would have given up. You've been rejected, therefore it's over. You don't need to try again. You got embarrassed. Your name is not on the list. But the decision you make when you arrive at the fork in the road determines your future. Whenever I was working out and got tired and I figured I ought to stop, Jordan has said, I close my eyes and see that list in the locker room without my name on it. Think about that. He turned his disappointment of not making the varsity team into fuel, and he lit a fire that would last a lifetime. He committed to training and to getting better. Training and getting better. So what, you didn't make it the first time? So what, you didn't make it the second time? So what, you didn't make it the third time? He committed to training and to getting better. And though he didn't make the varsity team, he would go on to earn a spot on the JV squad. His performance that season, I imagine, was one that the varsity coach would soon not forget. In that season, with Jordan on the JV team, he scored multiple 40-point games. He grew 4 inches, and he easily made the varsity team his junior year, going on to become their leading scorer, averaging more than 20 points per game. So there were some things, right, that Jordan could help, and then there were some things that Jordan could not help. The thing that Jordan could help, hear me, was training and getting better and not stopping. But the thing he could not help, which was his height, he grew 4 inches that year. Despite becoming a starting varsity player, Jordan's work ethic only increased in intensity. He was constantly in the gym, lifting weights and running drills. Countless hours led to his standout senior year, where Jordan would average a triple-double. That's an average of double figures in at least 3 categories. And then he was an All-American and a top recruit at nearly all the major college basketball programs, eventually signing to play for the University of North Carolina. Jordan would thrive in the college setting and lead his team to the NCAA championship game, scoring the buzzer-beating game winner. Jordan then left UNC after his junior season to enter his name into the NBA draft. In this new arena, Jordan would be undervalued yet again. Now, how many people, and let's be honest, how many people, the first time somebody undervalues you, gets upset, packs up, calls it a day, and says, they just don't know me. They just don't understand my value. They don't understand me, right? And they pack up and they give up. But that's not what Jordan does, all right? He was passed on by the Houston Rockets and the Portland Trail Blazers at the first and second pick. This is how he ended up on the Chicago Bulls at the third overall spot in the NBA 1984 draft. Interesting to note that Jordan made the time in his busy NBA schedule to go ahead and return to the University of North Carolina and finish his degree in geography. Smart man. The rest, if you have a sports inclination, is a matter of celebrated record. He has 6 NBA championships, 6-time NBA Finals MVP, 5-time NBA MVP, 14 NBA All-Star teams, 3-time NBA All-Star MVP, 10 All-NBA First Team honors, and the list goes on and on. Jordan spent the end of his playing career learning the ins and outs of basketball operations. I hope y'all are hearing that. As Jordan realized that he was going to come to the end of his career, he spent the end of his playing career learning the ins and outs of basketball operations. So when I compare him to other players that are coming along that people are saying could wind up being greater than Jordan, let's talk about the money moves that Jordan was making, all right, as he was nearing the end of his career. And then I want you to compare that to what the current ball players are doing and ask yourself, are they really on the level of Jordan yet? Okay? Listen to what he does. He worked with the front office before and during his tenure on the court with the Washington Wizards, and in 2006 purchased a stake in the newly established Charlotte Bobcats, which of course we know now is Charlotte Hornets. Soon after, Jordan took his love for the game of basketball and applied it to basketball operations off the court. Jordan had been a rich man before, but once he purchased an even larger stake in the team in 2010, they were reevaluated financially, the team was. And with that reevaluation, he reached billionaire status. So, we're not done. Jordan did not reach billionaire status by what his feet and his hands could do on the court. Jordan reached billionaire status because he bought a stake in a newly established team. All right? In other words, he invested. Jordan found something he loved and he refused to quit. Even after his on-court experience was over, he was preparing himself to still enjoy the love of the game, but enjoy it in ways that would no longer be a part of his physical working it out. All right? The other half of Jordan's business is shoes. Following his college career, Jordan signed a contract with sports agent David Falk. The first order of business was a shoe contract like all the other top-tier players of the time had. What Falk and Jordan didn't know was that Nike had already set sights on making Jordan the new face of Nike basketball. When the Air Jordan brand launched, it was projected to make $3 million its first year of sales alone, which was a pretty decent projection. However, because there are black children all over America who loved Michael Jordan at the time, all right? He was the legend. Instead, the first year of sales, they ended up making $130 million for Nike. Talk about an under projection, proving to be the most successful sports endorsement relationship in history. This relationship would continue into the 90s, creating a buzz for the prized shoes. The more limited the quantities, because this is a business principle, the more limited the quantities of each kind of shoe that came out, the higher the demand, resulting in, as we still see today in some places, camped out customers outside of shoe stores and occasional riots, all due to the brand of Jordan himself. The image he cultivated with his success and his work ethic. His name became synonymous with greatness. The Nike Jordan brand commanded $2.6 billion in shoes alone, another $1 billion in apparel and international business per a 2015 Forbes report. Think back to Jordan's first rejection. Think back. The first thing we talked about was Jordan being rejected from the basketball team. When he failed to make the varsity basketball team and he stood staring at that list in the locker room without his name on it. Ask yourself today, what is it that you know your name is supposed to be on, but it's not on there yet? And how do you feel about that? If you're the person that thinks that you're supposed to be on the top 10 list of whatever you're trying to achieve, how do you feel about your name not yet being on that list? And what are you going to do about it? Are you going to stay in pity mode because your name is not yet on the list? Or are you going to do what Jordan did, which is go back and practice and improve and get better? All right? Hold that image in your mind just like Jordan did. The next time you find yourself being blocked from achieving your dreams by something external, call up that image like he did and use it as fuel. Commit to working harder and getting better. Never stop. Because if you take this to heart, you will be that much closer to attaining your own power. I tell you, I don't know about you all, but that blessed me. What if Jordan had stopped at being rejected? Listen, what if he had stopped at being rejected from the JV team? None of anything that we hear about his future, his legacy, his wealth, that's now generational wealth for his children, none of that would exist had he just stopped at, oh man, my name's not on the list. I guess that I wasn't meant to play basketball. I guess that maybe I'm not supposed to do this. Maybe I'm just supposed to graduate high school and, go on and take what I can get. But he used his rejection as fuel. And I hope that somebody will do that today. I hope that you will not get petty, because it's so tempting to do so. I hope that you will not become petty. I hope that you will not become bitter, but I hope that you will become better and use your rejection as fuel for what you know and believe in your heart you are supposed to be doing. Now, you think that was an awesome story? Let's go on to Stan Lee. I'm excited about Stan Lee because I've heard so much about, I'm not really a comic book fan, although I have collected comics. I have some older comics that I've collected that were passed on to me. But I'm not really a comic fan per se. But I do know the comics because of the movie franchises. So we're going to learn a little bit today, if you don't know, about Stan Lee, the creator of, the co-creator of the comic book characters for Marvel Comics. And I think that this is going to be an encouragement, especially for those of you all who plan to go see Black Panther in the next week. All right. This is Stan Lee's quote. He says, "I learned early on that I'm not that different from most other people. So if I can come up with a character I think is exciting, I figure a lot of people maybe will have the same taste that I do." Stan Lee is a machine. He is best known for his work at Marvel Comics as the co-creator of legendary comic book characters who now hold dominion over the global movie box office. And as we know, they're already breaking records with the pre-sale tickets for the Black Panther. He's also that funny guy who makes a cameo in every Marvel film. Lee, like most other examples of powerful people in this book, had humble beginnings. But in his story, you will see a pattern that you should take to heart. The Marvel method is not simply the way Lee crafted stories by his paneling and inking team. It is an unstoppable work ethic that makes him indistinguishable from his life. Born in the Bronx in 1922, Lee took tons and tons of odd jobs as a young child growing up. Everything from delivering sandwiches for the pharmacy at Rockefeller Center to selling the New York Herald Tribune subscriptions door to door, to writing obituaries, to working as an usher at a Broadway theater. Another lesson to be learned: no job is beneath you, especially when you're starting out. Let me say that again. No job is beneath you, especially when you're starting out. If people ask me, what kinds of jobs have I worked from 13 years old, my first job was 13 years old, up until now, let's see. I've been a waitress. I've been I worked at my family's corner store as a cashier. I've been a night security guard at a college. I've been a daycare worker. I've worked in fast food. Like, no job is beneath you, especially when you're starting out. All right? Young people today seem to grow up with a sense of entitlement that the idea of making someone's coffee or fetching someone's dry cleaning or working in a drive-thru is embarrassing. This attitude must be snuffed out. And the best way to do that is to cite several heroes of today who were once unpaid interns. I've been an unpaid intern. They were errand boys or coffee makers of yesterday. You should approach every job you have with gratitude that anyone wants to pay you to do anything at all. And if you're working a free internship, you are getting and learning valuable information that you can take on to your future. Or at least you should be picking internships that help you increase your skills. All right? Because a lot of the skills that you learn should be transferable to whatever job field that you're going to go into. Approaching even the crudest, most servient jobs with enthusiasm and a drive to not only complete your tasks, but to excel in them is the only way to ascend the first crucial steps on your ladder to power. If Stan Lee did it, you have no right to feel above it. So get to work. Lee graduated early from high school at the age of 16, and he set out to become a serious writer. Stan Lee began as a pseudonym. His real name is Stanley Martin Lieber, that he would later adopt as his legal name. As I did, and as many other modern power players have done, Lee used his name to reinvent himself and to create a persona. You may want to consider doing the same, especially maybe if your name is long or hard to pronounce. Remember, if you want people to grant you power, they need to remember your name upon first hearing it. There is power in simplicity, and there is power in being memorable. In 1939, Lee's uncle, Robbie Solomon, helped him get a job as an assistant at a company called Timely Comics, which would later become Marvel. Yet another lesson here. Accepting help from those who can hold doors open for you is nothing to be ashamed of. You are in this world to succeed, and that is what networking is all about. If you know someone who knows someone, use that connection. In this first job at Timely Comics, Lee was initially assigned to the menial tasks like refilling ink for the artists, getting lunch and getting coffee. His proficiency in these tasks impressed people and eventually led to him being allowed to try his hand at filling in the text. And ultimately, he was made an editor and began creating characters. The only way to make that leap, like Lee did, from underlining other people's text to editor, is with good old-fashioned labor and enthusiasm. People will notice you if you do your job, whatever job it may be, better than everyone else around you. Refer to yesterday's message. All right? People will notice you if you do your job better than anyone else around you. If you're just starting out, strive to be the best person at getting the coffee. If your assignment is to get coffee, be the best at it. If your assignment, my assignment, in one of the places that I work, my assignment was to get there 30 minutes before everyone else and make the coffee. So guess what I learned to be good at? And I happen to say I'm pretty good at it. All right? Brewing a fresh, good batch of coffee. Having the sugar ready. Having the creamer ready. Going out and buying flavored creamer. Finding out what people like and what people want is a very powerful thing to do. All right? Make your dreams for the future known as you are doing it. Soon, you may ingratiate yourself with the right person, and that person may be the one to give you the opportunity to not get coffee anymore. This is the model of climbing the ladder, and it may be an old one, but it still works. Lee left the company in 1942 to serve in the Army, and once he returned, he had to do some work to reestablish himself. Remember, success is not a straight line. Somebody needs to put that in their notes for today. Success is not a straight line. He struggled for a while and considered changing careers and giving up his dream. But eventually, with artist Jack Kirby, he created his first superhero team, which most of us know today as the Fantastic Four. And from there, he would go on to co-create characters that are now known to almost everyone on the planet, nerd or not. He created the X-Men, the Avengers, including the Hulk, Iron Man, Spider-Man, and Doctor Strange. He wrote these characters for a time, then graduated to full-time publisher at Marvel, passing the torch. Oh, Jesus. Listen, he created characters, then he graduated from creating characters. Good morning and God bless. Then he graduated from creating the characters to doing something that I'm going to pray that leaders in 2018 really get a grip on and learn how to do. And that is passing the torch. He passed the torch, not before he was old and decrepit, not before he was senile and couldn't figure out who he was passing the torch to. He passed the torch to other artists and storytellers who carry on his character stories to this day on the page and on the screen. Lee is credited with creating, get this, because some of us I didn't know this, but this is pretty powerful. Lee is credited with creating the first African-American superhero. One time for Black History Month. Hats off. And the first African-American superhero was Falcon, not Black Panther, as people keep saying. So I have to correct them. All right? He created Falcon, who appears in an issue of Captain America. He would go on to use his series, including Spider-Man, to tackle deeper human issues than his contemporaries were doing, including he tackles these through his comics, the dangers of drug use, discrimination, racism, and subsequently the rest of the industry followed suit after Stan Lee. Isn't that awesome? So they followed suit and they began to loosen the censorship codes to allow for the discussion of these real world issues. So while people make fun of comics, okay, and they say, oh, that's just the world of make-believe, because people were attached to that world of make-believe, Stan Lee was able to interject real world issues in a genre where people came to it to escape to make believe. That'll preach all by itself. All right. So he used his medium to communicate about deeper issues that needed to be addressed in society. Because guess what? Somebody may not pick up a pamphlet about the dangers of drug use, but if they were already reading Marvel Comics, he was slipping that message in. The lesson here: if you want to make a tangible difference in the world, it is necessary to have the power to do so. In Lee's case, that power meant having the megaphone to get out positive social messages out into the world via the ascension and popularity of his characters. All right. Marvel as a company got into financial trouble in the 90s, and they began selling its most popular characters to movie studios to make ends meet. So how did these characters start making it into the movies? That's how. They got into financial trouble, and they had to begin to diversify and go into another arena so that they could pay bills. The firm filed for bankruptcy in 1997, and it looked as if collapse was inevitable. However, at the turn of the millennium, Marvel began partnering with 20th Century Fox to produce a series of successful film franchises, including the X-Men and the Spider-Man movies, which were smash hits. The strength of Marvel and what allowed the company to emerge from bankruptcy and survive was due to Lee's original characters. Today, Marvel owns some of the most popular and lucrative film franchises in the world. Lee was awarded a National Medal of Arts from Congress in 2008. Now, you suppose comes the time when Lee can sit back and enjoy his legacy. Not likely. Lee still writes books. He still co-creates characters, produces TV shows, and makes cameos in almost every single Marvel movie. He even makes regular appearances at the comic conventions. In a 2014 interview he gave to Chicago Tribune, he said, "I don't have to do them, but I like being with the fans. I learn more from them than they learn from me." Hallmark of a real leader. It is safe to say that he will likely never retire while he can stand on two legs. He could rest. Most people in his position would, but he won't. He doesn't want to. At the age of 94, there is still more to be done. I can't even go into how exciting it is that somebody at 94 years old is still excited about their career, is still excited about creating, still has thoughts about creativity, still wants to go to something as simple as a comic book convention to be around the people who enjoy what he has created. That he's not at the comic book conventions to grandstand, to say, "I am the founder." But no, he simply wants to be there, as he says, because I like being with the fans. I learn more from them. He's 94. I learn more from them than they learn from me. Just let that marinate. Just let it sink in. Okay? There go all of your excuses. You're tired. You're getting too old for this. The true renaissance of Lee's creations is arguably happening right now. It is my opinion that this would not be the case without his work ethic and the ethic of his successors who have learned from him. Take note of this attitude. The goal of Lee's work was not to earn enough to rest or retire. The goal of Lee's work has always been to keep moving and to keep creating. Perpetual motion is the name of the game. I think we might have time for one more. If you all want one more encouraging story for today, you can put some hearts on the screen. All right. Ah, I see some hearts. Yeah, because we've got about 20 minutes and we're still probably going to end before the hour. Warren Buffett. Somebody said yes, yes on my YouTube. Yes, yes. I tell you, that blessed me about Stan Lee. I have a lot more respect for who he is than I did. All right. So for those of you who have been hesitating about whether or not you should go see the Black Panther, I hope I just gave you some fuel to go and get your tickets and go see it. Because that was pretty awesome. I don't know about you, but that inspired me to say, let me go get my tickets because I want to see Black Panther. All right. Warren Buffett, known as the soothsayer, known as, some people call him the Oracle of Omaha. Pastor Ben said, I grew up on Stan. Awesome. Warren Buffett is known as the Oracle of Omaha. This is what he says. Someone sitting in the shade today, someone is sitting in the shade today because someone planted a tree a long time ago. Let's just stop right there. Somebody is sitting in the shade today because somebody planted a tree a long time ago. And so sometimes what we plant, we expect it to spring up really quickly, and we expect to personally benefit from everything we plant. But some of the things that you're doing in your life right now are not necessarily for you. Some of the things you're doing right now are not even necessarily for your children. Some of the things that you're doing right now is for future generations to come along and be blessed by what you're doing right now. That's something that I always have in the back of my mind when I'm writing, when I'm studying, and when I'm sharing information, is that someone outside of the immediate people that I know is going to come along in the future and they're going to benefit from what I'm writing or what I'm reading or what I'm sharing. All right. The writer says, Gene Simmons says this about Warren Buffett. Not all powerful people are mean-spirited in the pursuit of their ambitions. There's a gray area between aggressive, victory-oriented behavior and malicious behavior. And the man who walks that line best, by my insights, is Warren Buffett. He is, by all accounts, a decent man with a high moral compass. He makes headlines for being one of the few mega billionaires with a reputation for his absolutely fair, compassionate, and by-the-books business practices. Though he aggressively pursues his goals, he seems to do so without earning anyone's particular anger. For Buffett, being an ethical operator is not just a principled decision. It is a pragmatic decision. Buffett has said, it's easier to stay out of trouble than it is to get out of trouble. And I agree. Even if you take my advice about being Machiavellian to heart, you will realize that breaking the law, screwing people over needlessly, lying and cheating are not worth the risk to your own personal fortune and goals. Choosing to be honest, trustworthy, and charitable is not a moral decision, in my opinion. It is a pragmatic, calculated decision because you want to be as safe as possible and to protect your interests. When people know that they can trust you, there is power in that. Somebody needs to write that down. When people know that they can trust you, there is power in that. How do you build trust? You build trust by doing what you say you're going to do. Imagine how many bad comments I would get on my broadcast if I offered to give stuff away and people won a prize and I never sent them their prize. Like, that would be terrible, okay? And I'm quite sure that people would call me out on it. And I'm quite sure that they would not trust anything I had to say in the future. That's just one example, but I see it all the time. Sometimes people are doing a live broadcast and they're just talking and they're talking and talking. And underneath, you can see all of the stuff that people are saying about them while they're talking. Sometimes it's I've never heard back from you, or I called you and you never responded. You gave me an email to email you at, and I emailed you and you never responded back to me. I bought a product from you and I never got the product. I've seen this on live broadcasts with people who are trying to do business, okay, to a larger audience, but the people that they have not been above board with come on their broadcasts and they say, hey, don't trust this person. Don't listen to them. They're not a person of their word. And this has been in the last week. I've seen this on several broadcasts. So exactly, Two Beloved says your word means everything. When people know that they can trust you, there is power in that. So we want to make sure that we are trustworthy as much as life within us. Sure, there are things that happen. You know, maybe you cannot make a meeting. Maybe an accident happened. Maybe you got ill, etc. But even in those cases, it helps to follow up with people, right? It helps to say, I'm sorry I couldn't be at this event. This is what happened. Rather than letting people not know what happened to you or why you never showed up or why you never participated. And here's another one. If you can't participate in it, just tell the person I can't. Or if it's not something that interests you, it's easier to say, you know what? I appreciate what you're doing. I will share your flyer, or I will share it on my network pages, what you're doing. I think it's honorable that you're doing that. I'm excited that you're taking an initiative in something, but hey, wigs are just not my thing. So I'm not going to buy a wig because I don't wear wigs, right? It's okay to tell people that what they're selling, all right, or what they want you to be interested in or invested in is not of interest to you. But you can also say, hey, I can share it with a broader audience, and maybe someone that I do know loves wigs and they're looking for a wig. And so I'm going to share it on my platform because I know a couple of people that like wigs. They like to change up their hair every single week. And maybe you have something that they would like. All right. So it's always good to be truthful and to be above board with people because, again, there's power in trustworthiness. There's power in people knowing that you are going to tell them the truth. So he says here, Buffett was born in 1930 in Omaha, Nebraska. His father started his own investment company when Warren was just a child and worked diligently through the aftermath of the stock market crash. At the age of 8, Buffett picked up a book called 1,000 Ways to Make $1,000 by F.C. Miniker. Inspired and hoping to increase his nickel-a-week allowance, he sold Coca-Cola, he sold gum, and he sold magazines door to door. From these humble but ambitious beginnings, Buffett would go on to become the only person to create a top 10 Fortune 500 company from the ground up, which lets me put a plug here for all of the parents who don't know what to do with your entrepreneurial child. All right? If you have a child that has an entrepreneurial spirit, they're always looking to sell something. Let me encourage you to go ahead and formally set your child up with their first business. Get them a bank account. Drop some money in the bank account. Invest in your child. All right? And then ask them, what are they interested in selling? Help them to get started. You may have a little Warren Buffett Jr. in your home, and if you discourage that entrepreneurial spirit, you might come to regret it in the future. All right? This is 2018. This is the generation of the entrepreneur, in case we haven't noticed. All right? We have more younger millionaires coming up than our generation had. Why? Because they have parents who are seeing earlier their entrepreneurial spirit and they're investing in it. They're pushing their child to say, yes, you can do this. No, you don't have to do it illegally. All right. Now, we know that unfortunately this administration is pushing back on little kids in their entrepreneurial spirit. So I've seen articles where children who are selling lemonade outside their house are getting tickets for selling lemonade. That's ridiculous. But there are ways that you can help your child establish a legal business, all right, and encourage that entrepreneurship within them. Help them to pick something that they enjoy doing. One of the children that I know, she likes polish, and she likes to polish people's nails. And I'm like, you can set her up to do that, to just do not necessarily adults, but she can do little children, or she could do her peers and charge a nominal fee, and she can collect that money, save it, and deposit it. So it doesn't have to be something that's difficult. Whatever your child has a business bent for, you can encourage that as long as it's legal. Okay? Back to the reading here. Entrepreneurship can provide spiritual moments in a young person's life. This is how I feel about my experiences scrubbing fat off a butcher's chopping block and delivering newspapers as a kid. These things changed me internally and shaped who I am today. I imagine Buffett learned the same thing I learned. It feels good when nobody's there to tell you what to do. In other words, he liked at an early age to be his own boss. Even in modest circumstances, if you're willing to put in the hours and be clever about what people around you need, you can have the power to be your own boss. Once again, so long as you do not consider a certain job beneath you, that sort of ego is your enemy, especially starting out. Warren's father never cared much about money. He lived according to an inner scorecard and didn't pay attention to what other people had. He would go on to run for Congress and win, but Warren felt displaced when his family relocated to Washington, D.C. His grades began to tank, and his good habits gave way to bad ones. He would bounce around from the University of Pennsylvania to the University of Nebraska, and after failing to gain admittance to Harvard Business School, he ultimately ended up at Columbia because of an economist and author that he liked was teaching there. It was at Columbia that Warren's love for the stock market began to grow. He learned everything there was to know about the market and its value in economics. Warren began by purchasing stock in a small textile company. When prompted to sell the stock back to the company, the owner tried to give him a return that was just slightly off, just a few cents. In fact, normally this would not have been a big issue, but for some reason this upset Warren enough that he bought the majority share of the company's stock, fired the owner, and took complete control of the textile business. Warren then used the name of this company to create his umbrella holding firm, also known as Berkshire Hathaway. It was a strange move, but it speaks to his honest principles. Even a few cents off is still not honest business. This was the beginning of his legacy as someone who will do things right or not at all. After years of acquiring controlling amounts of stock in various companies, Warren came to understand that it was best that his corporation never interfered with daily operations of the companies he controlled. He played the game as a chairman, not a helicopter parent, and this would prove an ingenious way of managing relationships. Instead of going in and trying to do everything himself, he simply bought controlling stock in the business run by people that he trusted. Warren Buffett's actions spoke and speak louder than his words. In 1990, Salomon Brothers, a large brokerage company, had been submitting false bids to purchase more treasury bonds, and they were caught red-handed doing this. When the U.S. Treasury started to revoke their license, the firm was on the brink of having to declare bankruptcy. Warren, who had no knowledge of these dealings, had even written letters to the company warning against such behaviors, stood up and took the blame. And this was a time not unlike today when many CEOs preferred hiding behind the curtains of secrecy. Buffett, on the other hand, knew that if the company sustained that loss, not only would the stockholders take a hit, but also 8,000 jobs would be lost. At the board of directors meeting, he took the position of interim chairman and convinced the U.S. Treasury that practices such as these would never happen again under his jurisdiction. Read that again. He stood up, apologized for somebody else's mistake, and simply promised the government that it wouldn't happen again under his watch. This move demonstrates the power of a persona as a public brand managed properly. His name had become so synonymous with honesty, integrity, insurance, success, and good judgment that the Treasury eventually released its hold on the company's license on the word of Buffett. I'm telling you that this is possible for you too. If you never waver from your brand, if you never waver from what you stand for, if you say what you mean and mean what you say, life is like an ad campaign. The more consistently you stay on message, the more people you will convince. Did Warren have a hand in the wrongdoing? Not at all. But he cared about the ultimate consequences of remaining silent. As a man as handy with math as Warren Buffett knew, those 8,000 jobs that would be lost would affect more than just 8,000 lives. The cumulative result would effectively damage the market, ruining countless more lives. Take a personal blow like this and remain resilient is a source of real power and only bolstered his image as trustworthy. This honesty is his brand, his personal stock, beyond his billions, and a major source of his power. People buy stock in Berkshire because they are buying Buffett himself. They want a piece of his brand that he protects so strongly. Warren would go on to become the richest man in the world year after year until he was eventually surpassed by Bill Gates, who has now been surpassed by Jeff Bezos, with whom he developed a deep relationship and friendly rivalry. So what do you do once you've achieved more money and power than anyone else in the world? Warren decided to pledge more than half his fortune, $37 billion, to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, one of the largest single donations to charity in history. To this day, his contributions, which add up to around $2 billion so far, with more pledged in his passing, have been used in countless ways to help fight disease and wealth inequality, and the list goes on. When I say that the end justifies the means, when I tell you to be ruthless in achieving your goals and to put on your oxygen mask first, this is why. Buffett is able to improve the lives of countless people, including but not limited to the people who actually work for the companies he owns, because he achieved power first. If you climb the mountain first, you can let down a ladder. I hope that encouraged you. I know it encouraged me, because in the world of money, in the world of power, people tend to not look at trustworthiness as something that matters. They think that you have to scheme and hook and crook your way through society in order to be successful. But Warren Buffett is one of those examples that shows people will buy into your trustworthiness when you are trustworthy. Lastly, they said something really interesting as we close. I'll make sure I draw it for you. And this has to do with the whole music controversy that's going on. I may talk about that sometime this week, but not today. All right. See this? They talked about how he used that one company as his umbrella. The one company that tried to cheat him became his umbrella for all his other companies, sort of as a reminder that trying to get over on people is not a good idea. But for those of you who are wondering about gospel music, somebody asked the question, do we no longer have a genre today? Gospel music, for the most part, I think, except for Ty Scott. Ty Scott is the only one I know of that still, outside of independent brands, that still has full control over their company. All other brands are under the big three. I think it's Sony, Universal, and I forget the third one. But the three major music brands are all secular. They took all of the smaller companies, just like a monopoly. So all the other gospel-centric and all these other ones, all of them have been eaten up by the big companies. And so now gospel is under the umbrella of the secular. All right? So in case you didn't know that, in case you didn't understand that, this is why you see gospel singers contracted and doing work with secular artists. Why? Because they're no longer separate. They no longer have controlling interest. They no longer have control over the contracts. So whoever secular tells them to collaborate with, they're under contract of the secular labels to do so. All right? That's why I'm an independent artist, because I don't want to be contracted to do stuff with people that I feel violates my moral convictions. All right? So how did we get here? We got here because people stopped buying gospel music, including the people who say they live the gospel. All right? So what happens to a market when all of the Christians buy more secular music than they will buy gospel artist music and support gospel music? The gospel music companies got eaten up by the larger. So for those of you who are complaining about all of these collaborations that you disagree with, you got to go back to how did we get there? All right? So I may talk about this a little bit more this week. I'll try to figure out where to fit it in, maybe on my Thinking Thursday. But this is the reality. The reality that is that the gospel labels that you see, many of them are a sub-company of the secular labels. And therefore, they do what the secular labels tell them to do. And if the secular labels say, we want you to come up with music about love, joy, peace, hope, and goodness, and just don't use the name Jesus, just don't use the word repent in your songs, just don't use those terminologies, just don't talk about sin, then that's what they are contracted to do. All right? So just wanted to put that out there, to put some things in perspective while people are having these conversations about why are certain artists doing music with certain people that is making some of our stomachs turn when we hear the music. This is why. This is why. You want to see this change? Then you have to make a decision that you're going to stop pouring your dollars here and go back to pouring them here. All right? A part of artistic freedom is the ability to have a message that is not controlled by this. Got it? All right. Thank you for your extra time and attention today. Remember, light is the most daring opposition to darkness. So please go out today and be light. I hope that you all have a fantastic Monday. I hope that something I have said today has motivated you, has encouraged you to keep going, to not quit, to not stop, to be trustworthy. All of those different lessons that we saw in the readings on today. All right. Thank you so much. You know what to do. Hit the share button. All right. Hit the like button. Share it to your page. Invite somebody to join us tomorrow as we jump back into our talk about immigration and the black bourgeoisie. All right. Take care and God bless. And I want to thank you for hanging in there on our YouTube live stream as well. Take care and God bless.